What's up guys, welcome to another video, and in today's video we're gonna build a simple but yet an awesome weather application. Alright, so this weather application is gonna be a simple one. Alright, and by the way, we're gonna create this in React. Alright, it's not gonna contain any complicated stuff like that, so we're not gonna use any state management system or stuff like that. Alright, so what this application is gonna do is, first, it will take the location of your device, all right, whichever device with which you are actually seeing this application. It will actually take the location of your device, and with the help of that location, we'll actually make the call to an API, and that API will actually give our weather information. So right now, this is actually my location, all right, and whenever I refresh the browser, all right, it'll actually give me the weather details, which is 23 degrees Celsius, and it's also giving me a weather description, which is a little bit of haze as it is today right now, and it's giving me the wind speed, pressure, precipitation, and humidity as well. All right, you can do a lot other than this, but I just wanted to keep it simple. And by the way, you can also do this with simple JavaScript, and you don't actually need React in order to build this kind of stuff, but still I wanted to use React just to make you a little bit flexible if you are just a beginner. All right, and another cool thing is that if I change the location, let's say London, and if I enter, and there you go, it gives me the weather details of London as well. All right, instead of London, if I say Sydney and press enter, that's Sydney right there. If I say Boston, and there you go, it also gives me the weather details of that particular location. So whichever city or whichever place you're in, just type that out, and this application will actually give you the weather details of that particular city. All right, and for the API, we're actually going to use Weather Stack. All right, so, and it has a free version, so you don't have to pay anything in order to make the API call, but I think the API call is actually limited to like 100 calls per day or something like that. All right, but anyways, you can actually go here and say start using the API. It's already written that it's free. Okay, so you actually have to create an account. After you create an account, it will give you your API access key. All right, and this key is actually very important in order to make API calls. Let me just show you one example. Let's go to API documentation here, and let's see. So this is actually the API link with which you can get the weather information of a particular place. All right, so yeah, instead of New York, you can write anything, for example Sydney, or example London, and right here in your access key, you actually have to mention the access key, right, which you got after you created your account. All right, so let me just copy this up, Control C. Let's go here and let's just paste that. And let me also grab my API key. All right. Okay, better not create spaces. Now here, instead of access key, I have actually pasted the key which I got after I created the account. And for the query, instead of New York, let's write let's say London, right? And let's enter that, and there we go, it actually gives me the weather information of London. And with this, actually we can actually grab this information that we want, and we can actually display it on our screen. Right, so if I actually talk in terms of components, we're actually going to have two main components. All right, so first one is going to be this navbar. All right, I know that this navbar, we can't actually distinguish a navbar right now, but this weather app and this input field is actually a part of the navbar, and this display section. Right, so we're actually going to have two main components. All right, so I've actually created a folder called weather app, and inside that weather app, I've already created the React boilerplate, right, with the help of create React app. And if you don't know how to do that, just open up the terminal, inside the VS Code, or you can actually use git bash or just your normal terminal, and just write npx create react app. And if you're already inside a folder, just add a dot and it'll actually create your React boilerplate. But if you want to create a folder, you can actually create a folder, say weather weather app. This will actually create a weather app folder. All right, and inside that folder, it will create all the React boilerplate that you need. Okay, and after creating the React boilerplate, if you want to actually start the server, you can say npm start, and if you press enter, it will actually give you a server where you can actually view your React project. All right, and by default, it's gonna actually look like this. So that's the basic thing. Now, first of all, let me actually do some cleanups. All right. So first things first, let me go to the public folder, favicon.ico. I don't need that, and I don't need these logos. So let's just delete it. From the source folder, let's see. Let me delete app.test.js, logo.svg. I don't need that. I also don't need service worker here. Yeah, and I think that's it. Now this will actually give me an error saying no such file directory, blah 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 blah. That's because let's see, if you go to index.js, I have imported service worker, but that file actually does not exist. All right, and let me also remove this for now. Save that, and I think in app.js we also have to remove this code right here, because right now the logo file is not there. All right, also, okay, let me remove this as well, and here let me just write weather app just for testing, and there you go. Okay, because since this is the app.js, so whatever we write inside it, whatever code that we write inside this return function, it'll actually be pasted here. Okay, if you don't know what the hell is going on right now, you can actually go to my React course and get the basics out of it. Okay, let me go to index.html first, and let's see. I do want to change this title to, let's say, weather app. All right, that's okay. Alright, now the first things first, this application is going to have two major components. Alright, the first one will be a navbar, which is going to be, I think, right here. It'll just contain a title saying weather app, and the next thing it'll contain is a form, which will just have an input field. With that input field, we can actually type any place and get the weather details of that place. Alright, and the next component is actually gonna be the component which will display the weather details. Alright, but more importantly, okay, whenever we actually refresh this, or whenever we actually first open this application should actually get our device location. All right, and with the help of that location, it should actually give me the weather details of our location. All right, so whenever we actually enter inside this application or refresh this application, it should actually give me the weather details of my location. All right, so yeah, first of all, we're gonna do that. So since this is a functional based component right here, app.js, I don't want to use React hooks or anything complicated stuff like that. So I'll just turn this into a class based component. So class app extends react.component. Now this class contains a render method. All right, and that render method will actually return this. So all right, so yeah, now I do want to get my device location, right? But first of all, we should actually ask ourselves that when should we get the device location? Okay, so we should actually get our device location whenever we refresh the browser or whenever we first open this application. Okay, and if you don't know life cycle events of React, then there's actually a method, all right? And this is a life cycle method, okay? And it's something like this: component did mount, all right? And basically this method will actually run whenever you refresh your browser, all right? Whenever you first enter your application, because this method will actually run when the elements, all right, is actually mounted to the DOM, and that actually happens at the beginning, all right? Whenever you refresh the browser or first open the application, it happens at that point. And after the elements are mounted to the DOM, then component did mount method runs, all right? If I actually add something like console.log, let's say mounted, all right, this should test this out, and as soon as I save this file, this browser got refreshed, all right, and all the elements got mounted. And if you actually inspect this, and if you go to console here, you'll actually see this mounted, all right? As soon as the mounting happened, all right, this component did mount got executed, and the mounted here was logged out. So yeah, whenever we refresh the application or whenever we first open the application, we want this weather app to get our device location, all right? So this is the best place, all right, in order to get our location. Okay, so let's comment this out and say get device location. And this error, I keep saying again and again, that is basically due to this right here, all right? Since I deleted the icons, all right, so you don't need this right here. If you save that, and that error will be gone. Okay, let's close that up. All right, let me just close index.html. Now we understood about when should we get our device location, all right? Now the question arises how we should get the device location. Okay, so it's very easy. So we're actually going to use HTML API, all right? So HTML5 API has something called navigator object, all right? For example, if you want to just imagine a scenario in JavaScript, in just basic JavaScript, that if you want to actually get an HTML element, whether it be a p tag or a h1 tag or a form or an input field or a button in your JavaScript, if you want to actually get those elements, then you use something called document.getElementById or document.getElementByClassName or document.querySelector, or something like that, right? And so basically you are actually using the document object in order to get all the HTML elements in your JavaScript. Okay, so similarly, if you want to actually get the device location, we use something called navigator object. Okay, so first we should check if the geolocation is actually supported in your system. All right, so for that, let me do something called if navigator. Okay, and that's the object that we'll be using. Dot, it'll have something called geolocation. Right, and this will check if geolocation is supported or not. Like if supported, let's say console.log supported, and if it does not support geolocation, then let me just say console.log not supported, right? Something like that. So let's see if our browser supports geolocation or not. And there you go, it says supported. So I think my device supports geolocation. So if the geolocation is supported in my system, all right, so what we're going to do is now actually get my device location. And that's very easy. All you have to do is actually run a method, okay? And that's going to be something like this. So navigator dot geolocation, right? And this is actually by default an HTML5 API. Okay, so you don't have to call any external dependency or a library in order to use this. Okay, it's already there. So navigator.geolocation.getCurrentPosition, and getCurrentPosition is actually the method that we'll be actually using in order to get our position or the device location. All right, so this method actually requires a function to run. All right, so we'll create an arrow function inside it. And this function will actually require an argument called, you can call actually anything that you want, but it'll basically give you the position object. All right. And here, if you say console.log position dot chords dot latitude, okay, this will actually give me the latitude of your device. All right, so let's just save that and let me see. All right, and there you go, 26.746167 is the latitude of my device. For your device, it's going to be something else. All right, and similarly, instead of latitude, you can also say longitude. All right, so position.chords.longitude, and if you save that, it'll actually give you the longitude of your device, which will be, I think for me it's 88.3993411, right? For you it'll be different. Yeah, so with the help of this getCurrentPosition method, all right, which is present inside navigator.geolocation object, we are actually getting the device location. Now the next thing is that I actually have to save this location in my state. Okay, I haven't created a state, so let me just create that. So let's say state, all right, and say state equals to, and remember that state is an object, so inside that let me say chords, something like that. All right, and this will also be an object, and inside this it'll have two properties called latitude and longitude. Okay, so by default I actually want to add a value. Okay, so if you so that if your device does not support navigator.geolocation, then it will actually provide the default values of latitude and longitude. Okay, so for latitude I want to be 45, and for longitude I want to be, let's say, 60. All right, let's save that. And here let me actually create an object. So let new chords equals to, let this be an object, and here we will actually add our device location, our device latitude and device longitude. All right, so let's say latitude, that would be position dot chords dot latitude, and for longitude let's say position dot chords dot longitude. All right, let's save that. So right now inside my state I have chords property, and it has latitude and longitude, right? So here, after navigation was supported in my system, I got my device location and I created a new variable called new chords, and it has my new latitude and new longitude. All right, and it has my latitude and longitude of my device. And now what I can do is just change the coordination values with this value. All right, so let's say this dot set state. Remember that state cannot be removed or changed directly, so we're going to use this, and the value that I want to change is chords. All right, and the value with which I want to change is new chords. And just like that, the state value will be changed if this block runs, which means that whenever you actually open the weather application or refresh the application, the application will check first whether navigator.geolocation is supported. All right, because whenever you refresh it or actually enter inside the application, the React will mount all the elements in the DOM. All right, and as soon as that happens, component did mount method runs, and it first checks whether navigator.geolocation is supported in your system. All right, and if it's supported, then it will actually call this getCurrentPosition method, and that position method will actually give you the latitude and longitude, which I have actually stored inside new chords. And after that, the state will be changed from chords to new chords, and the value inside the latitude and the longitude of the state will be changed with these new values. All right, so let's save that, and let me just check my state here. So I hope that you have the React developer tools. All right, and this is actually an extension, so you can actually download it and add it to your Chrome. All right, it's very helpful in such cases. So let's go to my components here. Let's go to app, and as you can see here, by default I had actually used latitude 45 and longitude 60. All right, but as soon as the browser was refreshed, the mounting took place, and the latitude is now changed to 26 point something and 88 point something. Okay, which means that this method is running and this block is also running. All right, and this function is also taking place. All right, so yeah, now my default coordination was now changed to new coordination. Okay, and this coordination is actually the location of my device. So now what I want to do is actually call the API with this latitude and longitude data. Alright, so as I said earlier, we'll be using weather stack for our API. Okay, so do sign up for this, and after you it's actually it has a free version. So after you sign up and create your account, it'll actually give you I think an access key, right? And this access key is very important, and not only whenever you are using any API, in order to use most API, you actually have to sign in and actually get that API access key. All right, so whenever you call an API, you also need to use this access key, and it's very important. So yeah, create this access key. Okay, and weather stack will if you actually create an account, weather stack will automatically create your API access key. So yeah, after you create this access key, just save it somewhere else. Okay, so if I go to documentation here, so this is actually the link that we'll be using in order to get the weather data. All right, so here we have http api.weatherstack.com/current, and this will actually give you the current weather details. Right, and here for the access key, instead of your access key, we actually have to provide that key ID that you got after you created your account. All right, and instead of query London / United Kingdom, we're actually going to use coordinates. All right, this right here, latitude and longitude. So instead of query equals to London, what you're going to do is query equals to set our latitude, okay, and longitude. And in order to call the API, you can use fetch, or you can use async await, or what was that, Ajax. Good luck with that. But I'm going to use a dependency called Axios, and that's really helpful in such cases. So npm install Axios, and that'll actually install that. Alright, so Axios is installed, and in order to call that, all you have to do is say import Axios from Axios, and that's it. Okay, and now we're actually going to call that API. So let's say API call. Okay, so let me just say Axios dot, and in order to call the API, you actually have a method called get, and now inside this we're actually gonna paste that link. All right, so we're actually gonna paste this. So let me just say copy this here, and here instead of single quotes or double quotes, what I'm going to use is something called backticks. All right, and if you don't know where that is, it's just below your escape key in your keyboard. Okay, because we're going to use that ES6 templating string. So let me paste that API call right here. Okay, so http /current access key, and let's not add any spaces in between because that'll actually put you in trouble. And let me remove this for now, because for query I'm gonna use another values. Okay, so for the query, what I'm gonna do is, instead of just writing equals to London, I'm gonna use this. All right, so as you know that we actually have the latitude and longitude in our state, all right, in this chords property. So we are going to use these values. Query would be equal to, and if you want to use dynamic values inside a templating string, all you have to do is add a $sign and the curly brackets. So you can actually, inside this, you can actually rewrite the JavaScript variables. Okay, so what I'm going to write is this dot state dot chords. Okay, I guess it's chords, right? Yeah, it's chords dot latitude, and let's put a comma here, and again let's say, oops, I forgot to add the $. All right, so this dot state dot chords dot longitude. Okay, and instead of this access key, what I'm going to do is paste this, okay, the key which I got after I signed up. So let me copy this and let's paste that here. So yeah, right here, and there you go. So this is actually the our API call. Okay, and here in our query, we are actually first pasting the latitude and also the longitude. Okay, and after this get method runs, it'll actually return a promise. Okay, and in order to get that promise, we can actually use dot then. Okay, so this dot then method will actually expect the function to run. So, and we'll always get a response object. All right, and if you say console.log res, and this res will actually provide our weather details. Okay, so let's save that. Let's go here, let's go to console, and there you go, it's actually giving me the data. Okay, so let me actually recap of what just happened. So by default, our state had latitude 45 and longitude 60. Okay, and that's by default. And when this browser got refreshed, okay, and it actually refreshes whenever we save this file. So when it actually got refreshed, what happened was that the elements got mounted to the DOM. Okay, the elements were mounted to the DOM. Okay, and this component did mount method ran, and it checked whether navigator.geolocation is supported, and in our case it's actually supported. So this method get current position started running, and inside this method we're actually getting the latitude and longitude of our device. Okay, and we're actually changing the state's latitude and longitude with our device latitude and longitude right here. All right, and with this new latitude and longitude, we're actually requesting an API call. Okay, and since the API call was successful, okay, because we actually provided our ID and also the required query, so this API call was actually successful, then it actually returned us an object. Okay, and that object actually contains our weather details. So I hope you actually understood this much. All right, so now all I have to do, and since I already got the weather details of my current location, what I have to do is actually save this data in my state. All right, So let's go to data here, and so this is actually almost all the data that we need right now. Okay, so let's see if you go to location here. So this is actually the location of my device. Okay, from here I'm going to use name, country, and region. You can use any details that you want. Okay, it's up to you, but I'm just going to use that because I don't want my application or my video to be that long. Okay, it's just to help you understand. From here I'm going to, from the current property, I'm going to use let's say temperature, weather icons. Weather, by the way, weather icons will give you that weather. If it's rainy, it will just give you that icon of, you know, like raindrops. If it's sunny day, it'll give you an icon of that sun, something like that. Okay, I'm going to use weather description as well. I'm going to use weather descriptions as well. So patchy rain possible. Okay, wind speed, yep, I need that. Pressure, humidity, and precipitation. All right, just that much. Yes, so let me create a variable here. So let's say weather data equals when, let that be an object. All right, and here let me set the properties. Okay, so first it's gonna be let's say location, and for the location, so we have the main object. Okay, and this object is actually our res. Inside this object we have data, and inside this data we have location, and inside this location we have name. Okay, and that is actually our location. So in order to get this value, what we have to do is just say res dot data dot location dot name. Okay, so let's see here, and so let's go here and say res dot data dot location dot name, and that will actually give me this name right here. All right, okay, so by doing like this, you can actually add these details in your variables. So what I'm going to do now is actually quickly create the properties that I want. I hope you understood how you can actually get those datas and add it in your variables. All right, so I've actually got all the values that I've needed right here. Okay, so I got location, I got temperature, and remember for location I used res.data.location because it was actually inside the location property, and for temperature I used res.data.current because it's actually inside the current property, right? And for the description I used an array 0 right here because this is actually an array and I don't want to actually print every description. I just want the first one. All right, so for that I just used 0 here. Okay, and that'll actually give me the first information of that array. Okay, and yeah, I guess this is it. So, and I hope you are really careful whenever you're doing whenever you are actually extracting data from that API. I hope that you're very careful, especially with this especially with first getting the value itself, and second with some typos. Okay, I hope you're not making any spelling mistakes because actually, you know, it might take you a long time to debug that. Okay, so yeah, so I have that inside my object weather data. Okay, now all I have to do is actually add this in my state. So right now my state does not have any data to store this, so let's create that. And here let me actually create another property called let's say data. All right, and let that be an object. Save that, and here now we will actually add this values inside that data. All right, and here let me add this dot set state, and the value that I want to change is obviously data, and the value with which I want to change is weather data. All right, let's save that, and let me go here, and there you go, no errors. So I think the value is stored. So let me go to components here, and again I hope that you have your React Dev Tools installed. Okay, so let me go to app here and let's check our data. And there you go, we've actually extracted all the data from the API. So right now we have all the values. Okay, so right now we had location, temperature, description, region, country, wind speed, blah blah blah. Okay, and you can actually see the data here and along with the values. Okay, and for the image we also have this link, okay, which will actually take me to that particular image. So right now we are, after we made the API call, we actually got the data, and from the data we actually extracted some values and we are actually adding that in our state. All right, so till now that's what we have done. Yes, so I think almost the functional part is almost done, and now it's time for the display part. Okay, again I have those values in my state. Okay, so all I now have to display that in my browser. All right, so for the display part, I actually want, again, as I first said earlier, I want two components. One is the navbar and one is the display where I actually display the details. Okay, so first let me create that display part. Let that be a component. So display, let's say weather. All right, save that, and let me also call here. What the hell is this? So import say / components. I know that I haven't actually created this, but I'll create after writing this. So display weather dot JS. All right, and here let me create a folder. Gonna be components, and inside our components we're gonna create a file called display weather.js. all right, and this is actually this component will actually display our weather details, so we don't actually have to create a state in here. So this will actually just be a functional component. Okay, I actually have installed an extension called ES7 React Redux, and it actually gives me snippets in order to create or like shortcuts for my React code. Okay, so I'll be using that because I don't want to hard code everything. And if you want to use that, you can use that. If you just want to hard code everything, you can do that as well. Okay, so RFC will actually create a functional component. So if I say RFC enter, there you go. Okay, so by default, let me just add, let's say, display weather, and this is just for testing purposes, right? In our app I've actually used that. Okay, so let's just see. Display weather is not defined. Okay, that's because I actually haven't called this. That's my mistake, sorry about that. Okay, so display weather component right now has just display weather text. Okay, so I've called that in my app.js right here. I've imported it and I've actually used it here. All right, and that's why it's just showing display weather. All right, so now I actually want to create a few changes. All right, so in our app.css we have that default CSS. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just remove this with some pre-made CSS that I've actually made. Okay, and this is actually the pre-made CSS that I've made, which I'll be using this in my application because I don't want to hard code CSS and HTML, all that, because this is not an HTML and CSS tutorial. Okay, if you want that, you can just comment down below and I'll create some of it. Okay, but right now I just want to strictly focus on React, so I'll be just pasting it. If you want to use the CSS which I have made, then I have a link in my description below, which will actually take you to my GitHub page, and from there you can actually download the CSS file or even the source code and just paste it right here. But if you want to use your own CSS file, then you can do that as well. So I'm just gonna save this up, and right now the display weather is not seen because By default, I've saved the color to FFF. Right, if I just change that to, let's say, I don't know, DDD, and just save that up, and yeah, you can actually see display weather here. Okay, if I change to I don't know, 000, remove that, save that up, and there you go, display weather is right here. But by default I just want to change that to FFF. Okay, and let me go to index.css right here, and in our index.css we actually have some pre-made styles for our body. So I'm just gonna change, or just add a property called background image to linear gradient. All right, and inside this I'll have 3 parameters. The first one is how you want to set the linear gradient, which will be to right, and the next one will be 2 colors. Okay, and this is the hex code for that colors. Okay, obviously I got that from a website. So okay, so this is actually the background gradient. Okay, alright, so in order to display all the weather data, I'm actually going to do that inside displayweather.js. Alright, and I'm also going to be using a small kind of like a framework called Flexbox Grid. So what it just gives me is normal CSS classes, and if you've worked with Bootstrap, then it's kind of like that in terms of the layout. So it's gonna give me classes such as row and column, and that actually makes it easier in order to build a layout. So let me go to GitHub here. And I'm just going to use the CDN link, so let's copy that, and in our index.html, so let me just paste that here. Okay, so we can actually use those classes from Flexbox Grid. Alright, and for the displaying section, I already have built an HTML template for that, so I'm just going to use that. I'm not going to create that from start because, again, as I said earlier, this is not an HTML CSS tutorial, and for me, in order to build that from scratch, it will take a lot of time, so here, let me just add this right here. Right, so if you actually check that out here, let me just, did I save that? Alright, so let me just refresh it. Okay, so this is actually giving me the layout. Alright, however, it's not right now loading the image because we actually have to get that value. Alright, but yeah, so this is actually how our layout is gonna be, and this is actually the static values that I've just created. Alright, so we're actually going to add the dynamic values. Okay, that's from the state. So right now the weather details, everything is in our state. Okay, so what you're going to do is pass that state as a prop here, and in our displayweather.js we're actually going to call that prop and add the dynamic data all here. Alright, and again, if you want all this code, okay, you can actually go to the link that is in the description down below, which will actually take you to my GitHub page, and you can actually download this file and use this file there. Okay, so now let me add the dynamic data. Alright, and now the weather details and the weather data, everything is present inside this right here. Alright, so we're gonna pass this as a prop here. So let's say weather data equals to, say, this dot state dot data. Yeah, I think that's it. And since I pass this weather data as a prop here, we can actually get that here. So here, let's say props, and for now let me just console log this props. So console.log props. Let's just see what it gives us. Let's go here and let's see, let's inspect. Let's go to console, and there you go, it's actually giving me an object, and that object we have the weather data. And if I head to props.weather data, remember, because weather data is the prop that we had actually passed here. All right, so actually we're using that. So props.weather data will actually give you, let's see, an object, and inside that you have everything. All right, so now we can actually use destructuring and get all the properties inside this weather data object, which is location, temperature, description, region, country, and everything inside it here. Okay, so let's do some destructuring. Let's say const, and here now we want all these values. Okay, so let's just write location, temperature, there you go, description, region, country, there you go, wind speed, pressure, precip, which is for precipitation, and humidity, image, so img, right, equals to props dot weather data. Right, so props dot weather data is actually an object which contains everything right here. Okay, so location, temperature, description, all those things, and we're actually using destructuring in order to use those properties. So right now, while adding dynamic data, we don't have to do something like props.weather-data.location or props.weather-data.temperature every time. Okay, we can actually just use location, and you'll actually get the value, and that's why we're using destructuring. So let's just add dynamic data here. Instead of 12 here, we're gonna write temperature. Okay, and if I just save it, instead of 12, now this will give me something. Let's see. Now there you go, 19 degrees Celsius. Okay, and instead of sunny, this is actually our description. So let's see, we can actually write description, and we are directly writing description temperature because we have already destructured it from props.weather-data. Okay, if we had not used destructuring, then instead of temperature we would have to do props.weather.temperature or props.weather.description, something like that. Okay, instead of this, we can actually add let's see, region, here we can add country. Let's see, instead of source we can add, let's say, image. And now since image is an array, because I think, like, I can't see this right now, because since image is an array, let me just add 0 here. Let's go down, and wind speed, I guess we have the wind speed. Is that wind speed? So instead of wind speed here, let me add wind speed. Instead of 4000, let's add pressure. Instead of precipitation, let's add precip. And instead of humidity, let's add humidity. Right, let's just save that, and let's see. And we're actually getting an error. Let's see what happened. Cannot read property of undefined. So I'm guessing that image is not an array. So let's just remove that and see. Okay, there you go. So yeah, so whatever the value that we took from the API, now we're actually displaying it here. Alright? Okay, so let me see. I'm not getting my location here. Did I make something wrong? Oh, I haven't actually added that, so let me add that as well. Yeah, location. And let's see. there you go. This is my location, this is the state, this is my country, and the weather details here, and it's 19 degrees C today. Yep, it is. Anyways, now the next thing is I want a header above. Okay, so let's go to app.js here. Let me also create a div here, div, and let's add a class name, sorry about that, class name of container. All right, let's close that div here, save that. Let's see. All right, now let me create the navbar. So navbar, there we go. Let's import that here. So import navbar from /components /navbar.js. right? So let me create the navbar component as well. Sorry about that. In our components, let's create a new file, say navbar.js. Alright, so inside this navbar.js, again, let me create a functional component here. Let this class name be equal to row, and row is actually a Flexbox Grid class. Okay, and here let's just say div and class name equals to call md6, and this is also a Flexbox Grid class, and I want two of this because in this section we're gonna display the app name, which is the weather app, and in this section right here we're gonna create the form, okay, which is gonna be a simple input field. So let's do that first. Let's create an h1 and let the class name be equals to, I don't know, title h1, and let's just write weather app. All right, and here let me create the form. So form, let the class name be equals to region, something like that, form, and inside it I just want an input field, so input, and for the class name this is gonna be region input. And by the way, all these classes I've actually already created that in our CSS, and let me close that up. So let's just see, let's go here and says navbar is not defined. Navbar, where is navbar? Typo, sorry about that. It's gotta be navbar. Invalid DOM property class name. Alright. Okay, let me just set that here as well. And there you go. Now we are actually, kind of moving towards the end, and there I have a navbar component and also the display component. All right. Let me also add a placeholder in this input. So placeholder will be equal to enter location, something like that. All right. Okay, so yeah, the front end, which is actually almost complete. Now what I want to do is if I add let's say London here, and if I add enter, right now what it's doing is it's actually refreshing, because we have actually added a form here, and the basic nature of the form is whenever you submit a form, the browser actually gets refreshed. Okay, but when I do London, when I add London, or I know any place, and if I press enter, what I want to do is actually display the weather details of that particular region. All right, in this case it's London. So first thing what we have to do is first get this value. Okay, I have to get this value. Whatever I'm writing in the input field, I have to get that value, and whenever I submit the form, I actually have to use that value in the API call. Okay, and that will actually give me the weather details of that particular location. Okay, so in our state right here, in our app.js, let me add another variable, okay, called input data. Okay, and by default it's gonna be an empty string. Save that. Okay, and in our Navbar JS, okay, we have this input field, right? So I actually want to insert an event handler here. So on change, so whenever you press any key or remove any key, then this event is going to take place. And on change, what I'm going to do is create a function which is going to be e, and on change, what I'm going to do is actually create a function. Okay, and this function is actually going to take e, and this is basically an event object. All right, and here let me just actually write console.log e dot target dot value. Okay, and this will pretty much give me the value inside the input field. All right, so let me go here, let me inspect that. Where am I actually writing last name? Oh, it's here. Save that up. All right, that's pretty much gone. So what's now gonna happen is that we have added our event handler here. Okay, so every time I actually type anything inside the input field, this event is gonna get triggered. And what this event is actually doing is it's actually console logging out e.target.value, which is basically the value which I'm typing in the input field. So if I write, let's say J here, I'm actually seeing J in my console. Okay, so I, K. So every time I'm adding anything, or even if I'm removing anything, this event is going to take place. All right, and this value, okay, whatever I'm writing inside the input field, I now want to store that in my state. Okay, and it's going to be inside this input data. Okay, so I have to link the input data and the value I am providing in my input field. Okay, so instead of console logging the value, what I can do is just create a function here. So every time this onChange event takes place, a function will actually run. Okay, and that function will actually come from this app.js. So what we can do is actually create a props here. All right, and here let's just say props dot change region, something like that. All right, so whenever a change takes place in the input field, I want to call props.changeRegion function or a method. All right, and since it's coming from props, we actually have to pass this from here. All right, so change region we can actually pass from here, so change region, okay, and equals to, and in here we're actually gonna run a method, so we can actually do something like this dot change at this dot change. All right, let's save that and let's create that method right here below component in mount, and let's say track the input field, something like that. All right, and here we actually had created change method. All right, let this be an arrow function. Here let me just test that out. So console.log changing. Right, so now what's going to happen is that whenever I change anything in the input field, this event is going to take place. All right, and this props.changeRegion is going to get called. Okay, so props.changeRegion, we are actually passing it here. Okay, and what this is doing is actually calling this dot change, and inside our this dot change we are actually console logging this changing. Okay, so whenever the event takes place, the changing should be console logged in our console. All right, so Now if I go to console here, and if I type something here, and you're not seeing anything. Oh, I actually forgot to add the parentheses here. So let's see. Yeah, there you go. So whenever I actually write something here or make any changes, changing is being logged in the console. All right. But now what I actually want to do is, we need to add the value of that input field inside this input data. Okay. So somehow I have to get that data here. Okay, the value of the input field, I have to get it here. So what I can do is in our Navbar.js, okay, so we actually have this e object right here. All right, so we can actually pass this e.target.value here. Okay, we can pass this as a parameter, and in our app.js we can actually get that here, right? So value, something like that, and instead of changing, let's just test that out with value. Let's save that out. So let's see, let's say London, and there you go. Instead of changing, now it's console logging whatever we're typing out here. All right, and passing the arguments from one component to another is actually very simple in terms of functional based components. Had this been a class based component, I'd have to do something like props.changeRegion.bind, and in the bracket first I had to write this, and the second value I had to write e.target.value. Okay, and that would be really long. So passing the value is pretty much a little bit easier in functional based component, and it's pretty much simple. Okay, so that's why it's highly recommended that whenever you are not using a state in a particular component, then always use that component as a functional based component. Okay, it's only when you want a state in a particular component, just like in app.js, there now since we're not using any hooks, we have to use a class based component. All right, but in rest of the cases where you don't have any state, you can actually create a functional component and walk along with that. But anyways, enough talk. Let's just now change the input data of the state to this value. All right, so what we're going to do is say this dot set state. All right, and the value that I want to change again is input data, and the value with which I want to change is this value. All right, and this value is nothing but it's coming from here. Okay, it's e.target.value. all right, so let's save that and let's see. So let's open this components here. Let's go to app and let's see. So yeah, we have the input data right here. All right, so every time I type anything here, and there you go, the change is also taking place in our state, which is input data. All right, and this is actually what we want. Okay, because if you write let's say London here, and if you press enter, what I want to do is now with the help of this data, I want to create an API call. Okay, so now I also have to create another event, and that event should be right here in our form, because when I write something and when I press enter, what I want to do is get the API call. Okay, so for that we have an event call on submit, and that will actually run when you submit the form. Okay, submit meaning press enter or hit the submit button. Right now we have not created a submit button, so it will actually run when we actually press enter. All right, so on submit equals to so when we actually submit the form, I want a function to run, and that function is going to take e object or an event object, and then we're going to return props dot change weather, something like this. Okay, and this will actually be a function, and it will pass this e object. All right, now I'm going to talk about why I'm actually passing the e object later on, but this is what you're going to do. So when I hit when I submit this form, okay, it's going to run a function. Okay, that function is actually going to take an event object as a parameter, and it's going to return another function which is props.changeWeather. And since I used props.changeWeather, I have to pass this as a prop here. Okay, so change weather equals to, and here I want a method to run, which is gonna be this dot, let's just say change weather. All right, and now here let's create that method as well. So change weather equals to, and remember that we have passed an object which is e here, so we're gonna get that. So let's say event. All right, and open up the function. So basically what we're doing is, again, when the user submits the form, okay, this function is going to run and it's going to call props.changeWeather. Now props.changeWeather, I've actually passed it here, okay, and what this is doing is actually calling this method changeWeather, and inside of changeWeather, right now we have not done anything, but first thing we're going to do is actually disable the default effect of the form, okay, and the default effect of the form is that whenever you hit the submit button, the browser is going to refresh, okay. So let's say London, and if you hit enter, the browser is going to refresh, okay, but we don't want to do that because every time the browser gets a refresh, your data will be lost. All right, so first thing is we're gonna prevent that. So the way we can do it is by just typing out event dot prevent default, okay. This is basically a method, and now if you just say London, right, just look at the data here, and if I press enter, now the data is going to still be there even if I press enter, because the browser is not going to get refreshed because we actually prevented the default behavior of that form, all right, with the help of prevent default method. And that is the reason why I'm actually passing this event object right here, okay, because we do want to prevent that. All right, so next thing is actually pretty simple. We're going to call the API again. So let me go to weather stack here. Weather stack. Okay, so this time we're not going to call the API with the help of latitude and longitude. This time we're just going to call it by the place name or a location name. All right, so we're going to actually use this API. So let me just copy this, and remember that we had already installed Axios, so we're going to use that again. So let's say comment this out, and let's say API call, so Axios dot get, and this is going to be backtick. Remember, this is a backtick and not a single quote. All right, let's paste that here. Query New York. All right, now instead of this access key, I'm gonna use my own access key, all right, which is gonna be this. Let's copy that. Let's paste this up right here, and let's see, and now instead of query, we're gonna pass a dynamic value, okay, and this value right here will actually be the value inside the input data, okay, because remember what we are passing in this query is the place name, okay, the location name, okay, in order to get the data. So in our weather app, the London, which is there, which is the location, is actually being stored in input data, okay. From London, if I remove to, let's say, Sydney, then it is also being actually rendered here, okay. So input data is actually holding the values of the input field. All right, so we can use that value inside here, okay. So let's say this dot state dot input data. All right, so this is actually going to be our API call. Now after the API call is done, we get a 200 response, then we'll actually get a promise. So we're gonna get a response, and here let me just say console.log response. Let's save that. Now let's just check, okay. let's say London, enter. Let's go to console, and there you go. We actually got the response. It says status 200, meaning the API call was successful, and we also got the new data. Okay, and if you look here, this time the location is London and blah blah blah, right? But although we got the data, we still haven't kind of updated it here in our screen. All right, so we're gonna do that, and for that we're just gonna copy paste the same thing that we did right here. Okay, so this stuff right here, let me just copy that, because actually we're actually in order to access the data, we're actually using the same thing. Okay, location, temperature, description, region. Let's save that, and here with the help of set state, the data of the weather is actually being replaced by the new weather data. All right, so let's shake that, let's refresh. So this is actually giving me the weather details of my location. Now if I change the location to, let's say, London, and enter, and there you go, now it's giving me the location of London. If I say Sydney, press enter, and there you go, we have Sydney. Say Boston, there you go. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it, I guess. Okay, so I know that this is a very simple weather app, and you don't need like frameworks like React in order to build this kind of stuff. You can actually create that in JavaScript, but still I wanted to show you how to create a weather application in React. So yeah, that's it guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Even though it was a short application, it was a short one, but still I hope you learned something from it, or I don't know, refreshed your React knowledge, something like that. And again, if you want to get all the codes and some of the CSS and also the HTML templates that I used, I have a description in my link below where you can go to my GitHub page and download the stuffs all there. And yes, so that's it guys. Yeah, like, share and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.